Welcome back, everybody. This is Craig Alexander, three-time Ironman World Champion. And just let me tell you something about his history. If you are not a triathlon historian, he won the inaugural Ironman 70.3 World Championships in 2006, right? 2006, first time ever. He won that. He went on to win it again. He pitched up in Kona in 2007. His first time doing the distance, he got second place in Kona. Now that's pretty friggin' impressive, right? And then the next year he decided he was going to come back and he won it. And then he won it again in 2009. And then he won it again in 2011, setting a course record that stood for, I think, at least 6 years. So Craig knows when he's talking about. I'm going to ask his opinion about the coming Ironman World Championships this May in St. George. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the course profile, Craig, but it's going to be tough. A lot of climbing on the bike and a lot of climbing on the run.
Yeah, it's a different challenge, I think, to Kona for a few reasons. Course profile is a little different. Obviously, the climate, Utah in May, is a little different to Hawaii in October. So, but for me, that makes it interesting. I still think the same athletes, male and female, will be the ones contending for the titles. I think the champions and the best athletes find a way to rise to the challenge. So, but it will be an interesting race. First time the Ironman World Championships are taken from Hawaii. So I'm actually looking forward to the race in Utah. I think it's going to be a great race.
One of the things that I've commented to people about is that there is not a long history there in terms of athletes having experience on that course. Some of them race 70.3.
Yeah.
And so they know what they're in for. But it's going to be different, I would think, strategy-wise from Kona, where you've been able to analyze it for years and seen what works, what doesn't work. This could be a little bit more unpredictable.
For sure. And I think I just mentioned, I think a lot of the same athletes will be in the mix, but I think we'll see some other names in there too, who typically you might not see for that reason. Some people struggle cracking the Kona code. Just racing in a field of that depth, I guess with that course profile. Yeah, I just think it's going to be a different dynamic. I mean, I'm presuming May in Utah is going to be a wetsuit swim. So I think that already changes the dynamic of the race a little bit. And some of the athletes, have had success on that course, most notably Gustav Iden last year and Lucy Charles-Barclay. So, that's got to give them some confidence looking forward to May that they can really, unleash a great performance on that course in Utah.
And any names you want to throw in there that others might not know about or be thinking about? Obviously, that there's a lot of talk of Lucy, of Jan, of Gustav, of Blumenfeld, but who else are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think Jan's still going to be one of the main players. He hasn't raced a lot, and I think that's an advantage when you get to your late 30s, 40s. He's got a very smart coach, so I think for me, the interesting thing with Jan will be, is he peaking for 2 Ironman World Championships this year, or is he waiting for Hawaii? That'll be a big consideration, as peaking and making sure your form's at its best, and that timing element. It'll be interesting to see which races he's actually targeting. I presume if he's going to Utah, Ironman World Champions don't usually just go to make up the numbers. So I'm guessing he's going to be competitive if he goes to that one. For me, Gustav's the favourite on the men's side for Utah. I don't know. I've just got a feeling that on that course profile, I think Hawaii maybe suits his countryman Christian a little more. I mean, we saw Christian race in Cozumel in the heat and humidity down there. The Norwegians are so scientific and so well prepared, though. Both those boys, in my opinion, will be on both podiums. With a little caveat, Christian's racing apparently 3 Ironman races this year, the 2 World Championships, and then the Sub-7 project. So I don't know, that throws a little bit of a question mark on his third one in my mind. But again, they're so well coached and so well prepared. I'm guessing all the testing's been done. They know exactly to the day their recovery times. And so I just feel those 2 boys will be on the podium. I mean, no one really, I think, ever just explodes onto the radar. I'm looking for Joe Skipper to be better again, Sam Long. I'm super interested to see what Alistair does in Utah. I know he won the 70.3 race there, the Ironman North American Championships a few years ago, and just dominated a world-class field. I think he's a great climber. I think he's a great runner. Obviously grew up with the fell running in Leeds, so he can run uphill and downhill, which is going to be, I think, an important consideration in Utah. So I think Alistair's going to be up there somewhere. Lionel Sanders has a great history in Utah as well. So he's another guy. I'm a big Lionel fan, unabashed Lionel fan. I just love the way he races, and
yeah,
he's had some great success in Utah. So be interesting to see how he does. Yeah, it's a stacked field, as it always is. It's a world championship, but I don't think we're going to see too many people exploding on the scene, but you might see some names in the top 10 who you wouldn't have expected. For the reasons you mentioned, there's no real history or real form guide for this race in Utah. And also just the natural progression. Some athletes who are chipping away at the top 10 might take, a bit of a breakthrough performance and step up to a top 5 or a top 10. But I just see the standouts clearly being Christian, Gustav. Gustav's my pick. Jan, Alistair, Lionel. I mean, I know you want me to pick 2 or 3, but I'm going to throw a few names out there because it's hard to split those boys, and it's hard to pick a podium just because there is no form guide for an Ironman event on that course.
If you look at Kona, a lot of people think if the bike course is a really tough bike course that it favors the cyclist. But if I look back at some of the races in Kona, the days where the bike was the toughest, that actually ended up favoring the runners. So you can look at Lori Bowden, you can look at Heather Fear. Those 2 women won their world championships on some of the toughest biking days ever. And I think as the bike difficulty increases, granted, the good cyclists might be able to put more time on the runners, but it's going to cost them more and they're going to have worse runs. And so finally, in the end of the day, it's the person who's the better runner who comes out on top. Fast forward to what will be happening in May on a bike course that has more climbing than almost any other Ironman on the planet. I think it's still going to favor the person who can put together a really, really good marathon. I don't think it will be won on the bike. I don't think a Lionel Sanders is going to be able to go off the front. Sam Long, if he's improved his swim and he's together with those guys on the bike, he's going to give Gustav a run for his money.
Yeah.
I don't know. What do you think?
I agree. And look, I think it's a fallacy that only a runner wins. You have to bike well to be able to run well anyway. Like you say, 2 puts together the best race. And I agree. I think on a run course, it has a lot of elevation change up and down. Running downhill is a skill, and some do it really well. So I guess one name that I left out of the mix, who I shouldn't have, is Patrick Lange. I think he comes right into the mix on a course with more climbing, and he's just his running ability. And I think we saw last year he laid down 2 performances, Tulsa and Roth, that were 2 of the best Ironman races that I've seen in probably the last 5 years or maybe more. So he has the all-round game, can make a front an elite or a really select front group in the swim as well. So it's a hard race to pick, but I agree. I just think when the bike is harder, it's harder across the board for everyone, but you still need to be able to run. And on a course which has a lot of elevation change, that rings true more than ever, because it's not just about dialing up a rhythm and sticking to it. You're going to have to change your gait, change your stride a little bit. There's a lot more strength climbing those hills and muscle durability running down those hills. So someone like Patrick comes into the mix as well. And yeah, it's I don't think the race will be won on the bike, but like all world championships, I think it can be lost in the swim and on the bike. You cannot give up too much time on any course, particularly when the depth of field is what it is at a world championship.
So let me ask you one last question. If we were to take the 30-something Craig Alexander and stick him in this race and you're getting ready for it, what would you be doing specifically to make sure that you're the guy who crosses that finish line in first place?
Yeah, probably what I always used to do was, just concentrate on my own. I mean, you've got to be aware of what the others are doing, but concentrate on your own preparation. Have belief in what you're doing. You've got to make sure that you're swimming as well as ever and you're in that front group. I mean, I don't think it's a must. But when you have guys like Jan and Gustav who are going to be at the front, you don't want to be giving up any time. So you want to be in that front group. So I know that the years in Kona that came off the back of an Olympic Games, and we had a lot of ITU athletes stepping up, I always upped my swimming for those years. I know in 2009 we had Bevan Doherty, for instance, Dirk Bockel, Rasmus Henning, Andy Rayler, Andy Potts. So that lifts the swim level. So this year I think in Utah, and I just think the swim level's gone up across the board regardless these days. So you've got to be in that front swim group. You've got to be biking really well, but you've got to bike smart, I think, because even on this run course, I think it's going to take a sub 240 to win it without the heat and humidity. I know there's a lot of elevation change, but I just think there's no heat and humidity. So I think a sub 240. So you just need to be bringing your best across all three disciplines. They're the athletes who'll do well on the men's. And I mean, we haven't really touched on the women's, but it's going to be the same for them, you know, an Anne Haug or a Lucy Charles Barkley, Danny Reed. It's the ones who don't have a weakness and in fact have three strengths. And if I was preparing, I would be sharpening all the tools.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, from the master himself, the master tactician, Craig Alexander. Again,
I don't know if I'm the master. Aren't you you're the master?
Well, you were one of the few guys who's actually come into Ironman distance and right away nailed it. Obviously, Gustav Eden, Kristen Blumenfeld last year got some eyes opened when they posted their amazing times in Florida and again in Cozumel with Blumenfeld. But you've heard it. You got to have a good, solid swim, maybe better than ever. You've got to pace yourself on the bike and then be ready to run a sub 240 marathon for the men and probably close to 250, if not better, for the women. That's what I'd say.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't think you can have a weakness. There seems to be more depth in the sport. You know, there's always advancements. There's advancements in technology. I notice now on social media, the athletes are just fine tuning their bike positions in the wind tunnel and the velodrome almost monthly. Equipment's better. And I just think there's a lot of depth. There's so much depth, probably as much as we've ever seen in our sport. So you cannot afford to have any weaknesses and you can't afford really to make any tactical errors in these races.
It's going to be pretty exciting. I hope we get to see you there. You haven't traveled outside Australia since 2019 Ironman World Championships. Ladies and gentlemen, we got to get Craig Alexander to St. George in May. I'll be there. It's going to be an amazing race. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you next week.